everybody, it's Jennifer with Genealogy Technology here. And today I'm going to talk about a little something different. I'm going to talk about your mindset when you're doing genealogy. So as we all know, with genealogy, you immediately just start dealing with a ton of information. And one way that you'll read a lot to handle information, especially when you're stuck, is to look at it in a new way. So I know I've mentioned before that I really like timelines. So instead of just looking at a single ancestor's information and trying to go from there, I like to take a family and put their information in a timeline. And that can help me see patterns and different things that I may not have noticed before. Well, another thing that I do to help me organize information, and this may be just because I have a wild imagination, and the reason I do genealogy anyway is because of stories. But what I like to do is put myself in my ancestors' shoes. Now, there are going to be some cautions about that later, so watch till the end of the video. Don't wildly go off and thinking you know exactly what your ancestor would do in any given situation before I finish talking about this. But yeah, putting yourself in your ancestors' shoes. So this is not everybody, of course, but sometimes in genealogy, we can get real invested in just collecting new names and dates. I got a new ancestor, kind of like they're a Pokemon, and you got to catch them all. And that's just, for me, that's not what genealogy is about. It may be for you. Maybe you literally just want to, have as big a tree as you possibly can. However, when you put yourself in your ancestor's shoes, you have a couple of things going for you. First of all, you can find new avenues of research, and I will talk about that and some examples in a minute. And second of all, looking at things in a different way can also keep you from barking up the wrong tree. Okay, so what do I mean by putting yourself in your ancestor's shoes? Well, basically, it's really what it sounds like. You look at your ancestor's life, really give it a good look. Look at the details, the times they moved, when they had their first child, when they got married, if they got divorced, when their parents passed away and things like that. And just, try to think of, okay, if I were my ancestor and I was a woman living in 1854, what would I have done had this situation happened to me? Now, again, I am going to go over some cautions about that at the end of this video. So just, hold your horses. So here's an example from when I was a young genealogy lass and we didn't have all the great technology that we have today. I had an ancestor I was really interested in finding out about. His name was Lightner West. And he had an interesting story. His mom and dad got married. His dad was a school teacher. His dad immediately got drafted into the Civil War right after they got married. And then he died just 6 months later of disease. So in 1870, all this happened, but in 1870, I could not find my ancestor, Lightner West. He just was nowhere to be found. So 1870, was a time of tremendous upheaval in the United States after the American Civil War. People had moved all around. But yeah, he was nowhere to be found. So before, when I was just young and wasn't really putting myself in my ancestor's shoes, I was just he's gone. He disappeared. But then I started, using this technique and thinking about, okay, well, his mother, what would she do? She's a young widow. She has a baby that was born after her husband died. She could go back and live with her parents. She could maybe, remarry. So when I started thinking of that, okay, let me go check with her parents. No, they're not living there. Or I could look for a marriage record and see if she remarried. And sure enough, in 1870, she married a guy named John Whitmire. And so in 1870, I found them in a completely different county. And he was listed as Lightner, Leitner, some weird spelling, Whitmore. So of course, everything was spelled wrong. But at least I was able to get to the general location of where they were. So I was happy. I got to complete my set of censuses for this guy. I found him. And I wouldn't have done that if I hadn't, put myself in my third great-grandmother's shoes. Now, another example, I figured this out when sort of looking at timelines and families and migrations and things like that. There was a family, they had, probably 8 or 9 brothers and sisters, mom and dad. Mom and dad and most of the brothers and sisters, they moved to one county, from out of state to this new county. But one of the brothers, who happened to be my ancestor, he moved to a different county. So once again, I put myself in his place, okay, why, if this whole family's moving together, why did he go somewhere else? So, I can think, maybe they hated him. Maybe he was the black sheep. He just didn't like these guys, whatever. Or come to find out, he actually married somebody who was from that area. And I haven't actually done this research yet, but it leads me to believe maybe this was a farm area, so maybe they were given farmland. And so he married this nice lady with an inheritance. Of course, he's going to stay there where he has farmland. So once again, that gives me a clue. Maybe I can look for a land record where he was deeded some land from her father or her mother or even her grandmother. I've had grandmothers giving their grandsons-in-laws land in my family history. So yeah, it was pretty interesting, which I thought was pretty badass too. This is back in the 1800s. And I'll do one last example. This was a brick wall I had for a long time, and I'm just going to defend myself and say this was back in the day before we had digitized census records and things like that. You would go to the library, you'd look in a book and literally like look in an index for somebody. So I had one census record for this guy. His name was Alexander Guy. He was listed as a wagon maker. Now, I just couldn't find him anymore. I think I had him in Tennessee at the time, and just knew nothing about him beyond that he was a wagon maker. Well, if I had, again, put myself in his shoes and maybe done a little research on wagon making, I would have known that many wagon makers were itinerant. They traveled around making wagons. I guess, only so many wagons to be made in these little towns. So if I had known that, I would have realized, well, I need to expand my search. And sure enough, when I did end up finding him, I found him in Kentucky and Indiana and Tennessee. And they just kind of moved around. Now, my theory, and I haven't proven this one yet, is he went with the railroad. But yeah, I mean, if I hadn't put myself in his shoes, I didn't think anything about wagon making, then I may never have found that, especially not before we had all these good digitized records. And the other cool thing about that is it turns out his father was also a wagon maker, and I'm pretty sure his grandfather was a wagon maker, which it all makes sense. I just haven't quite confirmed the grandfather yet. But yeah, once again, if I didn't put myself in his shoes, then maybe I never would have found that. And last but not least, that caution. Our ancestors, they lived in a different time. We have so much information available to us now. They had limited information available to them now. They had biases and things that they believed that were incorrect. They just, sometimes we can't put ourselves into their shoes in a way we just can't know what they were thinking or what they would do. So don't limit yourself. Like I was thinking, for example, maybe you were missing a male ancestor in 1850 census. You cannot find him. Well, you know what? Maybe he went off to search for gold in California. I mean, who knows? Or maybe, you have a female ancestor who had a few children and she was widowed. Well, like I was thinking with my ancestor, maybe she went to live with her parents or got remarried, but maybe she went out west to homestead. I mean, you just never, ever know. So yeah, that's just my final caution is don't bring your own biases to what your ancestors would do, because that can really limit you and what you're searching for. But on the other hand, putting yourself in your ancestors' shoes, you can't really help bring some biases there, but it's really fun and it can help you, find new ways to search out your ancestors. All right, guys. Well, I really hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, I ask that you please hit the subscribe button below. Also, give me a like and a comment would be great as well. Your subscriptions, they really keep me going and they help me bring you more videos. I have been Jennifer with Genealogy Technology, and thanks so much for watching.